The announcement was only a few lines long, yet its impact landed like a door slamming shut inside the royal world. Meghan's connection to a coveted foundation board position was over, and Princess Anne had been placed into the seat instead. There was no ceremonial softness around the change. No sentimental explanation, just a decision, a name, and the unmistakable feeling that something much larger had finally broken beneath the surface. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. In this dramatized account, Meghan read the notification privately and understood its meaning before reaching the final line. The Royal Foundation Board, a governing group that guides charitable priorities, was not simply another committee. A seat meant influence, access, and direct connection to the working monarchy. When she reached the sentence confirming that Princess Anne would replace her effective immediately, she read it twice. Harry watched her lower the page, silent. Anne received the news separately, and celebration was the last thing on her mind. She listened, paused, then asked one question. Was everyone told before this was released? The Princess Royal understood why timing mattered. Her appointment could look like continuity, but it could also feel like a verdict on Meghan's place in royal life. Anne knew her long record of duty would be compared with Meghan's departure, whether she wanted that comparison or not. Charles felt the tension when the finalized notice reached him shortly before publication. The king noticed one phrase immediately: continuity of service. It sounded harmless, yet he understood its weight. The wording tied Anne's decades of public duty directly to the restructuring, making the change feel personal. He set the paper down without speaking, knowing Harry and Meghan would see the same contrast. William had already gone further. The prince had signed off on the restructuring before the notice reached the others, and when he placed his pen beside the board papers, the gesture felt final. An aide understood at once. This was not sudden. Discussions had been unfolding for weeks. The future king had reached a conclusion, and he was willing to attach his name to it. That changed everything. Meghan's removal was no longer only about a seat. Harry knew it. Anne knew it. Charles knew it. Somewhere behind William's signature was the reason the old arrangement had finally become impossible to defend. To understand why that signature carried such emotional weight, the story must now leave the board papers behind and move toward the four people who knew this decision would reopen wounds the palace had spent years trying to contain. A board seat can be replaced in seconds, relationships cannot. Behind the official language stood four people, carrying different versions of royal history. Anne, who had spent decades defining duty through endurance. Meghan, who believed her contribution had been judged through the lens of departure. Harry, who saw another door closing behind his wife. And William, who believed the institution could no longer live between past arrangements and present realities. Anne carried the appointment with restraint rather than satisfaction. The Princess Royal, a title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, built her life around duty that demanded little applause. For her, charitable work meant showing up, reading the brief, asking hard questions, and returning the next day. That history made her replacement of Meghan symbolically powerful, because the seat now seemed to compare two different paths through royal life. Meghan felt the contrast immediately. She had once seen the foundation role as proof that her ideas, causes, and ambitions left a mark inside the family, even after relationships around the institution had fractured. Harry understood that pain before she spoke. In a private exchange, he looked at Anne's name on the notice and told his wife, "Seeing it there makes the break feel permanent." Meghan did not argue. She admitted that permanence was exactly what frightened her. Anne felt no victory. During a conversation with Edward, she said she disliked being positioned as anyone's corrective, as though her appointment existed to prove somebody else had failed. He listened while she made the boundary clear. She would accept responsibility, but she would not become a weapon in someone else's family dispute. Edward understood why that mattered, because the symbolism of her role was growing louder than the work itself. William carried a different burden. The prince had been pushing for board members whose public responsibilities matched the authority they held, meaning the decision was not driven by resentment alone. He believed the structure had to reflect reality, yet Charles saw the danger at once. The king warned that replacing Meghan specifically with Anne could look like a deliberate comparison between two models of royal duty, whether anyone intended that message or not. That warning lingered because the decision had not begun with theory. Months earlier, a foundation discussion had turned unexpectedly sharp, forcing William to confront a contradiction nobody in the room could explain away. Anne would later understand its importance. Meghan and Harry would feel its consequences. And Charles would remember it as the moment the old arrangement stopped looking sustainable. That encounter would later be remembered as the moment everyone stopped pretending the old arrangement could simply remain untouched. The crisis did not begin on the morning Anne's appointment was announced. Its true beginning came months earlier, during what should have been an ordinary foundation review. The agenda concerned future charitable partnerships. The language was polite. The room was controlled. Yet one question about authority exposed a contradiction that nobody could explain away. And after William left that meeting, the future of Meghan's board connection was no longer merely uncertain. It had become unsustainable. William entered the review expecting procedure, not rupture. The governance structure, meaning the rules that decide who holds authority, votes, and represents an organization, had come under pressure after years of changing royal roles. Board members needed clarity over who could approve initiatives, speak for projects, and shape long-term plans. Meghan's historic connection still carried emotional weight, but she no longer worked inside the active royal system, and that gap had become impossible to ignore. Then William asked the question nobody wanted spoken aloud. At the closed Kensington Palace meeting, the prince asked whether someone who no longer represented the institution publicly should still hold a formal voting role over its future. Silence followed. No one answered quickly, and that silence told him more than any prepared briefing could have. Charles heard about the exchange later that day. In a private conversation, the king listened as William insisted the issue was about coherence, not punishment. The prince argued that authority and responsibility had to match. Charles pushed back, warning that changing Meghan's status would never be received as neutral. To her, and to Harry, it would feel like a judgment on everything that had happened before. Harry reacted exactly as Charles feared. After learning through a private family call that the discussion had taken place without him, he told Meghan that decisions about her legacy were being made in rooms where neither of them had a voice. She tried to stay measured, but the exclusion hurt. Harry heard that hurt and became angrier. Anne entered the story from another direction. During a documented charity discussion weeks earlier, she had raised concerns about accountability on major boards, arguing that anyone with formal authority should carry active responsibility with it. She never asked for Meghan's seat. Yet once restructuring became serious, her words made her impossible to overlook. That was the point of no return. William now had a principle. Charles had a warning. Harry had a grievance. Meghan had a wound. And Anne, without seeking it, had become part of the answer. When the brothers finally faced each other, procedure collapsed almost immediately, leaving William and Harry arguing about something far deeper than a foundation chair that neither brother could easily forgive. For weeks, everyone had spoken through documents, intermediaries, and carefully chosen phrases. Then the distance collapsed. William and Harry found themselves discussing the disputed seat directly, without enough formality to hide behind. What began with governance became a confrontation about loyalty. What began with Meghan's role became an argument about memory. And by the time one brother pushed his chair away from the table, both understood that the decision could never again be described as merely administrative. William held his ground because, to him, authority had to follow responsibility. The foundation's voting structure, meaning the system that determines who can formally shape its decisions, could not keep reflecting roles that no longer existed in practice. The prince believed leaving Meghan embedded inside that structure created confusion over who truly represented its future. Harry heard the same argument and saw something else entirely, an attempt to erase work his wife had already done. Harry finally asked the question neither brother had wanted to hear spoken aloud. With no aides between them, he looked at William and asked whether this was really about governance or whether the family simply wanted Meghan's name gone. The prince paused before answering. "I want the structure to reflect what exists now." Harry pushed his chair backward and called the distinction cold. William's expression tightened. William answered without raising his voice. The future king said avoiding painful decisions simply because they hurt was how unresolved problems survived for years. Harry shot back that institutions always found neutral language when the people being hurt were somewhere else. Meghan's seat, he insisted, represented proof that her ideas and work once mattered. Removing it felt less like reform and more like rewriting that chapter. Charles entered only after the tension had sharpened. The king looked from one son to the other and understood instantly that procedure had failed to contain the emotion. He urged Harry to separate Meghan's personal worth from institutional authority, then warned William that correct structure did not automatically mean painless consequences. Neither brother looked satisfied. Both knew he was right. Then Harry learned the replacement list had already narrowed to Anne. That discovery changed his anger. The Princess Royal's reputation for relentless duty gave the decision a symbolism he believed the palace fully understood for years. William denied that the choice was designed as a comparison, but Harry no longer trusted the distinction. That left one final battlefield. Neither brother controlled how the restructuring would be justified in writing, and a smaller circle was already shaping the words that would define Anne's appointment. Inside that quieter circle, the real battle was no longer over sympathy. It was over who possessed the authority to shape the foundation's future. Anne never campaigns for the chair. That is precisely what makes her difficult to oppose. While others argue about symbolism, the Princess Royal continues working, reading briefings, and asking practical questions with almost brutal simplicity. By the time her name reaches the final discussion, the argument is no longer whether she wants the position. It is whether anyone around the table can present a stronger institutional case against giving it to her. Charles studies the restructuring papers alone, knowing the choice has moved beyond personality. The new criteria demand active service, regular board attendance, direct oversight, and the ability to represent foundation initiatives inside the working monarchy. Board oversight means the formal responsibility to guide decisions and hold projects accountable. Anne meets every requirement with unusual force. Her decades of charitable work, relentless preparation, and refusal to chase attention make her difficult to challenge on practical grounds. Then Charles reaches her name on the final recommendation. The king removes his glasses, places them beside the papers, and says nothing for several seconds. He understands the problem immediately. A structurally logical choice can still create a devastating personal message. Replacing Meghan with one of the monarchy's most respected working figures could look less like reform and more like judgment, whatever the official explanation says. Charles raises that fear directly with Anne. He asks whether another candidate might avoid making Meghan feel deliberately displaced. Anne does not soften her answer. She tells him she will accept only if the position requires real work, real responsibility, and real accountability. She has no interest in becoming a symbol used against Harry or Meghan. If the appointment is meant to send a message, she wants no part of it. William hears about that conversation through a private family briefing and sees it differently. The prince believes Anne's refusal to politicize the role is exactly why she should take it. To him, her restraint proves she can stabilize the board rather than deepen the feud. The future king is not looking for someone who wants the seat. He is looking for someone who can occupy it without turning it into a personal victory. That reasoning changes the balance. Charles still worries. Anne remains cautious. William becomes more certain. And once the final approval is placed before them, the argument quietly reaches the point where it cannot be undone. With the signature secured and the announcement prepared, the machinery moves quickly. For Meghan and Harry, that is when an argument about governance becomes a reality they can no longer negotiate. The most painful part is not the headline, it is the timestamp. Meghan receives formal confirmation before the public announcement, leaving only a narrow window between private knowledge and worldwide scrutiny. There is no room for negotiation. No invitation to propose another arrangement. The decision has already crossed the point where conversation might change it. And as Harry reads over her shoulder, both recognize the same brutal detail. Anne's appointment is effective immediately. Meghan reads the notice again, slower this time. The formal restructuring means the foundation is matching voting authority with members who are actively serving inside the royal system. In simple terms, those still carrying official duties will now hold the seats that shape its future. Her charitable work outside royal life remains untouched, but the change cuts one of her last formal links to the structure she once helped represent. Harry understands why that matters before she says a word. Meghan reaches the final paragraph, folds the page once, then opens it again. The movement is small, but Harry recognizes the effort behind it. He asks what she wants to do. She answers quietly, "Nothing today." The restraint unsettles him more than anger would have. To her, speaking too quickly would mean letting hurt control the first response. To him, silence feels like surrender. Harry reacts differently. He wants clarification from Charles immediately, and believes the timing leaves his wife almost no dignity before the world begins interpreting the decision for her. Meghan asks him not to turn the first hours into another fight. He agrees reluctantly, but the frustration remains. The seat may be institutional, yet the wound is intensely personal. Anne hears that the notice has reached them and makes her own request through a private call with palace staff. She insists there must be no celebratory language around her appointment. The Princess Royal understands that one person's new responsibility is another person's public removal, and she refuses to let her name become a victory banner over Meghan. Then Charles calls Harry himself. The king avoids prepared language and tells his son directly that the decision will not be reversed. Harry pushes back, but he hears something final in his father's tone. Charles is not asking for agreement. He is explaining the boundary. That firmness changes Harry's strategy. He stops fighting the seat itself and asks for one private conversation where nobody speaks through titles, staff, or official positions. And that request creates the turning point nobody inside the institution could manufacture. A conversation where titles, board papers, and prepared arguments are deliberately left outside the room. The turning point arrives without ceremony. No advisors sit nearby. No communications team prepares language. Harry and Anne meet privately with one uncomfortable truth already between them. She now occupies the position his wife has lost. Yet the conversation becomes something neither expected. Anne does not defend the institution. Harry does not demand that she surrender the seat. Instead, they finally discuss what happens when family members become symbols of decisions they did not personally design. Harry asks for the meeting because Anne's appointment has become impossible for him to separate from Meghan's treatment. The board seat now feels like a public comparison between his wife and an older model of royal service. Anne understands that fear. The Princess Royal, a title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, agrees to meet because silence could make her acceptance look like hostility. She wants him to know that taking responsibility does not mean supporting every message others attach to it. Harry does not waste time. With no aides present, he asks Anne whether she believes Meghan failed the family. The question hangs between them. She answers without anger and without comfort. She is not there to judge Meghan's life. She is there to perform the work now assigned to her. Harry had expected defense or criticism. Instead, he gets a boundary. That answer unsettles him. Harry admits his deepest frustration is not simply losing influence. It is watching every institutional change become another public verdict on Meghan, as though each new decision must prove something about why their royal life ended. Anne listens carefully. She tells him, accepting the seat does not erase what his wife contributed before leaving. Changing responsibility, she says, is not the same as pretending the earlier chapter never existed. Anne then makes one thing unmistakable. She did not ask for Meghan's position, did not campaign for it, and did not design the restructuring that placed her there. Harry hears the distinction differently now. For the first time since the announcement, his anger begins separating the woman sitting opposite him from the symbolism surrounding her appointment. Nothing is reversed. Meghan does not regain the seat. Anne does not surrender it. Yet something important shifts between them. Harry leaves without agreement, but also without the same personal resentment toward her. By the time he walks away, the private battle has softened, but outside palace walls, millions are only beginning to interpret the replacement, and one image is about to define the entire controversy. Within hours, a decision discussed in guarded rooms becomes public property. Commentators reduce months of governance arguments to two photographs placed side by side, Meghan on one side, Anne on the other. Some see rejection, others see institutional consolidation. Yet the most powerful public moment comes not from a studio debate, but from outside Buckingham Palace, where one newspaper front page captures exactly why the appointment has become emotionally combustible. Public reaction splits almost immediately. One side frames the change as a modernization of governance, meaning the rules and structures that determine how an organization is directed. Another treats it as the final institutional separation between Meghan and the royal system she once represented. Palace messaging remains disciplined. Anne's experience is emphasized, while Meghan is never criticized, reflecting the Princess Royal's earlier insistence that her appointment must not be turned into someone else's humiliation. Then one image cuts through all the arguments. Outside Buckingham Palace, visitors gather around a fictional front page showing Meghan and Anne beneath the stark headline, "Anne takes the seat." Cameras catch one woman pointing from Meghan's photograph to Anne's before telling her companion. That says more than the statement does. The remark spreads quickly because it captures what official language cannot contain. The public sees symbolism even when the palace speaks only about structure. Anne encounters the coverage between engagements and immediately looks uncomfortable with what her name has become. The Princess Royal places the newspaper aside and tells an aide to continue with the scheduled briefing. She refuses to discuss the headline further. For her, the work matters more than the drama, yet that restraint cannot stop others from casting her as the winner in a contest she never wanted. Meghan chooses silence. She does not answer the comparisons, challenge the palace statement, or attack Anne. Her restraint frustrates commentators waiting for confrontation. But it follows the decision she made when the notice first arrived. Nothing today. Harry follows the same path. After his private conversation with Anne, he knows attacking her would distort what actually happened between them and deepen a conflict neither of them wants. That silence changes the story again. The public argument grows louder, while the people at its center refuse to feed it. Anne keeps working. Meghan steps back. Harry holds his anger. And one question remains. The answer is found not in the loudest headline, but in what each person chooses to do after the cameras move on. In the end, the board seat does not destroy a family, restore an old relationship, or erase the years that came before it. It does something quieter and more permanent. It draws a line. Anne accepts responsibility for the institution as it exists now. Meghan accepts that her future no longer depends on holding a place inside it. Harry learns that not every change is a personal attack. And William finally accepts the cost of making institutional boundaries unmistakably clear. Anne enters her first board session without triumph. The Princess Royal opens the briefing folder, asks for the first agenda item, and treats the appointment as work rather than conquest. The board, meaning the group responsible for guiding the foundation's major decisions, now reflects the active royal structure more clearly. That clarity matters because authority and responsibility are finally aligned, but the emotional cost of reaching that point remains impossible to ignore. Meghan chooses a different direction. She makes no attempt to reclaim the seat and turns her attention toward independent charitable projects outside royal life. Her decision carries its own meaning. Public contribution does not require continued validation from the institution she left, and stepping away from the chair does not erase the work she once brought to it. Harry still dislikes how the change happened, yet his private conversation with Anne prevents anger from becoming another permanent family fracture. He can separate the woman from the decision now. William reaches a harder conclusion. The prince knows the restructuring solved a real contradiction, But he also understands that institutional clarity can wound people who once stood beside him. Charles accepts that lesson too. The king recognizes that preserving every old arrangement simply to avoid pain would only delay choices the monarchy eventually had to make. He remains saddened by the damage, but he no longer believes emotional discomfort can be the reason an institution refuses to change. That becomes the final truth. Anne replacing Meghan is not a story about one woman defeating another. It is the moment two royal paths finally separate. One represents responsibility inside the institution. The other represents a life built beyond it. The appointment closes the chapter completely. Meghan's formal connection ends. Anne assumes the responsibility, and the monarchy chooses structural clarity over emotional ambiguity without denying the pain that choice created. And when Anne opens that first board folder while Meghan turns toward a future entirely her own, the empty chair finally reveals its meaning. Two journeys stopped competing for the same space and were allowed to become separate stories. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.